Nathan Hale had walked out of the Four Seasons in downtown Seattle hundreds of times, but never once had anything stopped him cold until that night. A tiny girl no more than 6 stepped out of the shadows and whispered, "Sir, please. I'm not asking for money, just a bowl of soup. I won't eat it. I need to take it to someone." Her voice didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't beg. They carried something far heavier than hunger purpose. And in that single moment, the billionaire who thought he'd seen everything realized he'd seen nothing at all. Nathan paused on the marble steps, still holding his phone, his driver waiting at the curb. The February air was sharp, the kind that bit through even the warmest coat. Yet the little girl wore only a thin cotton dress, a faded lavender cardigan, and sneakers far too big for her feet. Her hair was braided unevenly, as if she'd learned to do it herself. He should have walked past. People approached him all the time for favors, donations, or opportunities. But this child didn't look like she belonged to the street or to a scam. She stood too straight. She chose her words too carefully. And the way her small hands clutched each other tight, determined, did something to him he wasn't prepared for. "What's your name?" Nathan asked, lowering his phone. "Lily," she answered. "Please, sir, I promised I'd be quick." Promised. A child who made promises in the cold night instead of playing or sleeping. Something was wrong. Nathan glanced toward the restaurant behind him, a place where dinner plates cost more than most people made in a week. He wasn't a man easily manipulated, but he was also not the man people assumed a cold-hearted tycoon without a thread of softness left. He sighed and nodded. "Wait here." The maitre d' looked confused when Nathan walked back inside and asked for a takeout order of hot soup and rustic bread, but no one dared question the founder of Hale Technologies. Within minutes, Nathan stepped out again with a steaming, insulated container. When he handed it to Lily, she didn't tear the lid open or beg for a spoon. She held it as if he'd just given her something sacred. "Thank you," she whispered. "Truly." "Aren't you going to eat something?" he asked. She shook her head. "I can't. I have to bring it back. She needs it more than I do." Who? A sibling? A mother? Nathan didn't know why he cared, but he suddenly did. Lily backed away, clutching the warm container against her chest, and turned into the alley with careful steps, as though protecting the soup from spilling mattered more than her own hunger. Nathan watched her disappear into the darkness between 2 tall buildings. His driver rolled down the window. "Sir, heading home." Nathan didn't answer immediately. He felt an odd pull, curiosity mixed with something more personal, something he didn't want to name. Children didn't usually make him emotional. Yet this girl had stirred an old echo in him, a memory of a time when someone else had once protected him the same way she was protecting whoever waited for her. He finally spoke. "I'll be late, Larry. Go on home." Before the driver could protest, Nathan hung up and followed the girl. The pavement shifted from polished stone to cracked concrete within 2 blocks. The bright retail lights of downtown faded into dim street lamps buzzing faintly. Nathan stayed back, letting Lily stay unaware of him. She walked with a sense of direction, turning corners without hesitation. She didn't look around like a child, wandering lost. She moved like someone who had taken this path many times. That alone put a hard knot in his chest. She crossed under the monorail tracks and into a neighborhood Nathan had never had a reason to visit. Rows of old duplexes, rusted fences, boarded windows, and the faint sound of a television leaking from somewhere behind thin walls. A man, sweeping his porch, nodded at Lily. A woman carrying groceries gave her a tired smile. They knew her. Nathan's pace slowed. Something inside him tightened. A child this young shouldn't be walking alone at night through a neighborhood like this. Not in Seattle, not anywhere. Lily stopped in front of a rundown cottage squeezed between 2 abandoned homes. Paint peeled off in large strips. A single porch light flickered but didn't fully illuminate the entrance. Nathan ducked behind the nearest cedar tree, watching as she climbed the 3 steps. She opened the door gently, whispering, "I'm back." Nathan heard another voice, soft, older, frail. "Lily, honey, you took longer today. I was getting worried." He took a few steps closer, unable to stop himself. Through a thin crack in the curtains, he saw a dim living room, nearly empty except for a worn sofa and a small table. And on that sofa sat a woman with silver hair pulled into a loose bun wrapped in a faded blanket. She looked pale, exhausted, her breathing shallow. Lily knelt beside her and proudly presented the soup. "A nice man gave this to us. It's still hot. You have to eat it." The woman smiled, but it was the tired kind, the kind people wear when they want to hide how much pain they're in. Nathan felt something inside him shift hard. He'd followed a little girl expecting to uncover a scam, or at worst another heartbreaking example of Seattle's homelessness crisis. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to see a child caring for a sick woman with a tenderness beyond her years, and he definitely hadn't expected the faint spark of familiarity in the woman's face, a whisper of memory he couldn't yet place. For the first time in a long time, Nathan Hale felt a tremor of something he couldn't buy, couldn't control, couldn't ignore. He stepped closer to the window, heart pounding, realizing he was seconds away from uncovering a truth far more devastating than anything he had imagined when Lily first begged him for a bowl of soup. Nathan stood outside the small cottage, the cold night pressing against his back, but nothing compared to the heaviness settling in his chest. Through the thin curtains, he saw Lily helping the older woman sit up a little straighter, positioning the soup in her hands with a gentleness far too practiced for a child her age. The woman's fingers trembled as she tried to lift the spoon. Her breathing was strained shallow, every inhale a visible struggle. Nathan watched for several seconds, something tugging at him, some echo of familiarity he couldn't place. He moved closer, unable to silence the instinct rising inside him. As the woman leaned forward, the dim light caught the curve of her jaw. Then her voice, soft but unmistakably warm, even through exhaustion, drifted toward the window. "Thank you, sweetheart. You always take such good care of me." The voice hit him like a memory that had been locked away too long. He knew that voice. His stomach dropped. He stepped back, then forward again, desperate for a clearer view. When Lily fussed with the blanket around the woman's shoulders, and the woman tilted her head to thank her, the angle of her smile completed the memory. Grace Whitmore. The woman who had raised him when his parents were too busy to remember what grade he was in. The woman who'd held his hand through nightmares and read him stories long after she should have gone home. The woman who disappeared from his life without warning when he was 10. He stared, breath caught in his throat. She looked smaller now, fragile, worn down, as if life had taken back every ounce of strength she once used to care for him. But the eyes were the same, gentle and observant, the eyes of the one person who had loved him in the most uncomplicated way he'd ever known. Nathan didn't remember walking to the front door. He only realized he had moved when his knuckles rapped against the weak wooden frame. Inside, Lily froze. Grace turned her head, confusion clouding her expression. Nathan stepped into the doorway, illuminated by the porch light's pale flickering. Grace. His voice cracked in a way he hadn't expected. Her eyes widened. The spoon nearly slipped from her hand. For a long heartbeat, she simply stared at him, disbelief, shock, and something deeper mixing in her gaze. She lifted a trembling hand toward her mouth. "Nathan," she whispered. Just hearing his name in her voice again nearly undid him. Nathan moved forward, stopping only when he was close enough to see how pale she truly was. He wanted to hug her, to lift her into his arms and carry her out of that collapsing house, but his feet wouldn't move. He felt caught between the man he had become and the little boy who once clung to her apron strings. Lily looked between them, startled. "Grandma, you know him." Grace's eyes softened as they fell on the girl. "I knew him many years ago, honey," she said quietly, "when he was about your age." Something inside Nathan twisted. He had built a life of achievement, power, and money, but the only person who ever truly felt like family had been quietly suffering just miles away, unseen, unnoticed, forgotten. He turned toward Lily, trying to steady his voice. "She took care of me when I was a boy," he said. "I wouldn't be who I am today without her." Grace flinched, embarrassed, as if ashamed for him to see her in such a state. "Nathan, you don't have to be here," she murmured. "It's late and this isn't a safe place for you." He finished, glancing around the room. The air smelled faintly of damp wood. A small space heater hummed weakly in the corner. The wallpaper peeled like old sunburned skin. The kitchen sink behind them dripped steadily into a rusted basin. The refrigerator door hung a little crooked. "You're sick," he added. Grace attempted a reassuring smile, even as her voice trembled. "Just a rough season. I've had worse." "No," Lily said firmly, "she hasn't." It was the honesty of a child, raw and unfiltered. Grace frowned, but Lily stepped forward, placing herself between them with her small fists clenched. "She coughs at night. Sometimes she can't stand up." "And last week?" "She fainted." Her voice rose, filled with fear she had carried alone far too long. "I tried to make her eat, but we didn't have enough food. She says she's fine, but she isn't." Nathan felt the world tilt. Lily wasn't just hungry, she was terrified. She'd been fighting a battle no child should ever face. He dropped to one knee, leveling his gaze with hers. "You've been taking care of her all by yourself." Lily nodded, her chin wobbling, despite her attempt to stay strong. "She's all I have." That sentence struck deeper than anything yet. Grace shut her eyes, as if the weight of that truth finally broke something inside her. Nathan stood again, voice harder, firmer, the voice of a man used to solving impossible problems. "Grace, why didn't you ask anyone for help? Why didn't you contact me?" Grace took a slow breath. "You were building something great, Nathan, changing the world. I didn't want to disrupt your life. And after I left the Hale household, I didn't think you'd even remember me." The pain in her words was worse than the rundown room, worse than the sickness stealing her strength. Nathan moved closer, lowering his tone. "I looked for you once," he admitted, "but my father said you chose to leave. I was a kid. I didn't know any better." Grace shook her head gently. "Your father made it clear my help was no longer needed. I didn't want you to feel caught in the middle." Nathan felt a surge of anger at the man he barely spoke to anymore, but above all he felt guilt thick and suffocating because, no matter the reason, the truth remained. Grace had been alone while he thrived. He reached out carefully, taking her cold hand in his. "You mattered to me, Grace. You still do. I'm not leaving you like this." She blinked rapidly, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. "I don't want pity, Nathan. It's not pity," he said softly. "It's gratitude." Lily watched them, her expression shifting from fear to something like hope. The small room felt suddenly fuller, warmer, as if a broken connection had been stitched back together. But beneath that warmth ran a deeper current, the quiet, devastating realization that the woman who once saved him might now need saving herself, and whether he was ready for it or not, he knew he could not walk away again. Nathan returned to the small cottage the next morning, with 2 grocery bags in hand. Nothing extravagant, mostly basics, and a few things he remembered Grace loving years ago. He told himself it was simply practical help, but the truth was more complicated. Seeing her weakened the night before had triggered something deep in him, something protective and unfinished. When Lily opened the door still in her pajamas, her face lit up with a relief she couldn't hide. "You came back," she said, as if she'd been holding her breath since he left. "I said I would," Nathan answered gently. Grace was sitting up on the couch wrapped in the same blanket, but today she looked a little stronger, or perhaps it was just the comfort of knowing she wasn't facing everything alone anymore. She tried to sit straighter when he entered, embarrassed to be seen in such a vulnerable state, but he motioned for her to relax. "You shouldn't be moving around much," he said, setting the groceries on the small kitchen counter. "I've been taking care of myself for a long time." Nathan Grace replied, her tone warm but edged with pride. "And now you don't have to," he said simply. Lily trailed behind him as he unpacked items, watching every move, her big brown eyes following him with a mix of curiosity and trust. When he handed her a pack of colored pencils he'd tucked in with the groceries, she gasped. "For me, you've earned them," he said. "Your drawings last night were incredible." Lily beamed as if he'd handed her the moon. Nathan spent the rest of the morning helping Grace sort through the mail piled on the small table bills, overdue notices, medical forms she'd been too tired to complete. She apologized for the mess, for being a burden, for allowing him to step into her problems, but he dismissed each apology with the same quiet determination. "You helped raise me," he told her. "This isn't charity, it's the least I can do." Grace looked away, blinking back emotion. Later, while she rested, Lily brought out her small stack of drawings. She laid them gently on the coffee table and explained each one, proud and animated. One showed a garden she wanted to build someday. Another showed her future dog, which she had already named Murphy. Then she pointed to a third drawing, a shaky but heartfelt portrait of 3 stick figures holding hands. "This one is us," she said, "from last night." Nathan studied it. He recognized himself in the tall figure Grace in the silver hair, and Lily between them with a bright yellow sun drawn overhead. Something tightened in his chest. "You made this morning?" he asked softly. Lily nodded. "After you left, Grandma said sometimes people disappear for a very long time, but I told her you wouldn't." Grace, listening from the couch, let out a small sigh. "Lily, honey, adults get busy. Life takes people in different directions. Not him," Lily said with absolute certainty. Nathan didn't know whether to smile or ache from the weight of her trust. He quietly folded the drawing and placed it into his coat pocket. "Thank you," he told her. "I'll keep it." In the following days he visited often, sometimes bringing meals, sometimes just sitting and talking with Grace while Lily played nearby. Each visit deepened something he hadn't felt in years. Lily began treating him not like a billionaire or a stranger, but like a familiar presence, someone safe. One afternoon he brought her to the Hale Technologies campus. She hesitated at the towering glass building but relaxed when he took her hand and told her she didn't have to be afraid of anything inside. He led her to the innovation wing where developers were testing child-friendly VR programs. Lily's eyes widened as she slipped on a headset. She giggled, reaching out to touch virtual butterflies swirling around her. "This is magic," she whispered. "It's technology." Nathan said, though, watching her wonder, it didn't feel like the tech world he knew. But magic works too. He stood there observing her tiny, brave imaginative, and wondered how someone so young managed to carry so much responsibility without breaking. For years, he'd believed success was measured by share prices and global expansion. But watching Lily explore a world she'd never imagined possible, he felt something shift inside him, a redefinition of what success or purpose might actually look like. On the drive back, Lily turned to him, her voice quiet. "Do you think Grandma will get better?" "She's strong," he said. stronger than she knows. But sometimes she tries too hard to pretend. I hear her coughing at night when she thinks I'm asleep. Nathan glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. She wasn't crying, but the fear in her voice was unmistakable. He forced a steady tone. We're going to help her. Together. Together, she repeated as if testing the word. Then she smiled, small but hopeful. I like how that sounds. Back at the cottage, Grace was resting in her recliner. Lily immediately rushed to her, telling her about the VR butterflies. Grace laughed genuinely for the first time since Nathan had arrived in her life again. When Lily ran off to color with her new pencils, Grace looked at him with an expression that carried both gratitude and worry. I don't know what we did to deserve all this, she said quietly, but I do know I can never repay you. There's nothing to repay, he answered. She shook her head gently. You're building a connection with her, a bond, and she hasn't had that with anyone besides me. I'm afraid if something happens to me. Her voice trailed off, but the meaning hung in the air. Nathan took a seat across from her. He saw in her eyes the same fear Lily carried, the fear of leaving the child she loved without a steady anchor in the world. I won't let her face anything alone, he said. Grace studied him for a long moment. You're becoming important to her. Important in a way that could break her if you ever walked away. He didn't flinch. I understand. Grace exhaled a mix of relief and concern. She's a bright child, loving, resilient, but underneath all that strength is a little girl who's had to grow up far too soon. I know, he said, and that's exactly why I'm here. For the first time, Grace didn't argue. She simply nodded, her eyes softening. You've changed, Nathan. The boy I knew was kind, but guarded. The man you've become seems ready to let people back in. He didn't know how to respond. All he knew was this. Every day he spent with Lily, every conversation he had with Grace, every moment he saw something fragile and hopeful forming between the three of them. It felt less like rediscovering a past connection, and more like building something new. A family he never expected. A responsibility he didn't fear. A bond that was no longer optional but essential, and he wasn't going anywhere. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Thursday morning when Nathan arrived at the cottage and found the curtains still drawn. Normally, Lily would burst through the door the second she heard his car, but that day the house was silent. He knocked lightly at first, then harder. No answer. His stomach tightened. He tried the handle, locked. Lily, he called. It's Nathan. Are you inside? Nothing. A surge of panic pushed him to circle the house. Through the narrow bedroom window he caught a glimpse of movement, small, frantic. Lily's face appeared pale and streaked with tears. She fumbled with the latch and pushed the window open just enough to speak. Something's wrong with Grandma, she whispered, voice shaking. She won't wake up, right? Nathan didn't hesitate. Step back, sweetheart. He forced the window open, climbed through, and landed in the cramped bedroom. Grace lay on the bed, her breathing shallow and raspy, her skin drenched in cold sweat. The moment he touched her forehead, he knew this wasn't just exhaustion. How long has she been like this? He asked. Since last night, Lily managed hugging herself as if trying to hold her fear together. She kept coughing and couldn't stand up. I tried to give her water, but she dropped the glass. I didn't know what to do. Nathan grabbed his phone. You did the right thing staying with her. I'm here now. He called 911, giving the dispatcher their address with a clarity that surprised even him. His voice was firm, controlled, but inside he felt something close to dread. He'd faced billion-dollar crises with less panic than he felt standing beside Grace's fragile frame. When the paramedics arrived, Lily clung to Nathan's arm, refusing to leave his side. They watched as the team lifted Grace onto the stretcher. Her eyes fluttered open, briefly finding Nathan. "Don't scare her," she whispered. "You're going to be okay," he said, but the words scraped against the fear rising in his chest. At the hospital, they were ushered into a fluorescent-lit waiting room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee that had been sitting too long. Lily sat stiffly beside him, her small hand gripping his tightly. She didn't cry, but her silence was louder than any sob. A doctor finally approached middle-aged, tired eyes behind his glasses. "Mr. Hale, I'm Dr. Patel. Your friend is stable for now, but her condition is serious." "What are we dealing with?" Nathan asked. "Severe pneumonia, likely untreated for too long. Her oxygen levels were dangerously low when she arrived." The doctor hesitated. "There are complications. We found underlying issues during her tests, anemia, possible heart strain. She's very weak." Lily looked up sharply. "Is she going to die?" The doctor knelt in front of her, gentle but honest. "We're doing everything we can, sweetheart." The words weren't a no. Nathan wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She finally let the tears come, burying her face into his side, trembling, with a fear no child should ever have to carry. He held her, steadying her the way Grace once steadied him. Hours passed. A nurse eventually told him Grace was allowed one visitor. Lily begged to see her grandmother first. Nathan lifted her onto the hospital bed, watching as she clutched Grace's hand and whispered, "I'm here. I'm right here." Grace managed a faint smile, brushing a weak thumb over Lily's cheek. Nathan stood near the door, giving them privacy but unable to look away. The sight of them, two people who had nothing in the world but each other, hit him in a place he'd buried for years. After the nurse gently urged Lily out so Grace could rest, Grace motioned for Nathan to come closer. Her voice was thin, hardly more than a breath. "You need to look after her," she said. "If anything happens." "Don't talk like that. I'm serious, Nathan." She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength. "She can't go into the system. She wouldn't survive it. She's too sensitive, too stubborn, too brave. She needs someone who sees her, someone who cares." "I'm not letting anything happen to her," he said, but the words felt too small compared to the gravity of what she was asking. "You've become important to her, and she's become important to you, hasn't she?" Grace's eyes opened again, tired knowing. "I see it." Nathan didn't deny it. Grace reached for his hand, gripping it weakly. "Promise me you won't leave her alone." He swallowed the weight of her request, settling into him like a vow he'd been preparing to make long before she asked. "I promise." When he stepped back into the waiting area, Lily ran to him. "What did she say?" she asked. "That she's fighting," he said gently. It was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. Lily studied his face, searching for something solid to hold on to. "You won't leave me, will you?" Nathan knelt to meet her eyes full of fear and hope tangled together. "No, I'm staying right here." Her bottom lip trembled. "People always say that. Then they go." "I won't." He said, his voice steady with a certainty he'd never felt before. "Not ever." She stared at him for a long moment, then lifted her pinky. "Pinky promise." He locked his pinky with hers. That night, while Lily slept curled up on the waiting room couch with her head in his lap, Nathan realized something with absolute clarity. He wasn't simply helping out of gratitude or guilt. He wasn't making temporary arrangements or playing a role out of obligation. He was stepping into something far larger, far deeper. And he knew without any hesitation that he wouldn't walk away from it. Spring came slowly that year, almost cautiously, as if it understood how fragile the world inside Grace's hospital room had been. But little by little, the gray skies lifted, and with them so did Grace's strength. Weeks of treatment, rest, and careful monitoring brought color back to her cheeks. Her breathing steadied. Her eyes regained their familiar warmth. When Dr. Patel finally said she could be discharged with strict instructions for ongoing care, Lily hugged him so tightly he laughed. Nathan handled the discharge paperwork, arranged for at-home nursing support, and coordinated her medications. Grace protested at first, insisting he was doing too much, but her voice wavered when she tried standing alone. She accepted his help not because she wanted to, but because she finally understood Lily needed the stability he offered. Instead of returning to the old cottage, Nathan brought them both to his penthouse. He had already prepared everything: Grace's room set up downstairs for easier movement, a nurse scheduled to check on her daily. He tried not to notice the shock in Grace's eyes when she walked into his home. The expansive windows overlooking the Puget Sound, the high ceilings, the polished wood floors, luxury she had never known. "This is temporary," Nathan said gently, sensing her discomfort. "Just until you're fully on your feet again." Grace rested her hand on the back of the couch, steadying herself. "Temporary is fine," she murmured. But her eyes softened when she glanced at Lily, who was already exploring the living room with excitement, pointing at everything like she'd stepped into a new world. Those first weeks moved quietly, almost tenderly. Lily settled into her new routine: school in the morning, coloring or reading in the afternoon, always checking on her grandmother between activities. Grace began physical therapy. Nathan often sat with her during her sessions, listening to her stories, many of them ones he remembered from childhood. The past felt closer than ever, but so did something new, something that wasn't about old wounds, but about rebuilding. One afternoon, Nathan found Lily at the kitchen table, sketching with fierce concentration. She didn't look up until he sat down. "What are you working on?" he asked. She turned the drawing toward him. It was a house warm, inviting, with a wide porch and a backyard full of trees. 3 stick figures stood in front, one tall with dark hair, one with silver hair, and one with 2 pigtails. "This is where I want us to live," she said simply. "Somewhere with a yard, so Grandma can sit outside and I can plant flowers, and maybe a dog." "You really want a dog, don't you?" Nathan asked with a smile. "Yes," she said firmly. "Families have dogs." Her voice was so matter-of-fact that he couldn't help but laugh quietly, but her drawing stayed on his mind all evening. Later, after Lily had gone to bed and Grace was resting, he stepped out onto the balcony and let the idea settle in him. The penthouse was beautiful, efficient, modern, but it wasn't a home for a child. It wasn't a place where someone like Lily could run barefoot in the grass, or where Grace could enjoy the sunlight on a quiet afternoon. It wasn't the place this new family belonged. The next morning, without making a grand announcement, Nathan started visiting properties around Seattle: houses with big kitchens, safe neighborhoods, and yards large enough for Lily's dream garden. He didn't say anything to Grace until he'd narrowed the options down to 3. When he finally showed her the listings, her eyes widened. "I told you this living situation was temporary," he said lightly. "But temporary doesn't mean unstable. We get to choose what comes next." Grace studied him for a long moment. "Nathan, are you sure this is a life decision, not just a gesture?" "I know exactly what it is," he replied, "and I'm sure." Lily's reaction was less contemplative and far more enthusiastic. She launched into his arms as if he'd just given her the greatest gift imaginable. "Can we go see the houses today?" "Please." By the end of the week, they found it the house from Lily's drawing almost brought to life. It stood on a quiet street in Magnolia, a craftsman-style home with a deep porch, tall windows, and a yard filled with old maples. Grace walked room to room, touching door frames as if confirming they were real. Lily spun circles in the living room, declaring each corner her favorite. Nathan signed the contract without hesitation. Moving day felt like a celebration. Grace supervised from a rocking chair on the porch, while Lily directed the movers with earnest seriousness, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Nathan brought in the final box and set it beside Grace. "This is yours," he said softly. "All of it." Tears filled her eyes. "I never imagined anything like this. It's not about the house," Nathan said. "It's about making a life together." In the weeks that followed, the house came alive with routines. Lily biked in the driveway, drew chalk flowers on the sidewalk, and helped Grace water the herbs Nathan planted for her. On weekends, Nathan took Lily to Discovery Park, where she collected pine cones and told him stories about school and the friends she was slowly making. She seemed lighter now, still thoughtful, still wise beyond her years, but no longer weighed down by worry. Grace grew stronger too. She started cooking again, simple meals. At first, then old recipes Nathan hadn't tasted since childhood. The house smelled of cinnamon and rosemary and something like peace. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Nathan stepped onto the porch where Grace was sitting wrapped in a soft shawl. The sun was setting behind the water, painting the sky gold and pink. Grace looked content, tired, but deeply at ease. "You know," she said softly, "I spent years worrying about what would happen to Lily if I couldn't be there for her." Nathan nodded. "I know. But I don't worry anymore," she continued, "because I've seen how you look at her, and how she looks at you." He didn't speak right away. The truth rested in his chest, warm and steady. "She's family to me," he said. "You both are." Grace smiled, a smile he remembered from years ago, full of pride and affection. "Then you've given me more peace than you'll ever know." The next morning, Lily bounded into the kitchen holding a new drawing. This one showed the three of them sitting on the porch of their new home, a big dog at their feet, the sun shining overhead. She placed it in Nathan's hands and said, "This is our happy ending." Nathan looked at the picture then, at the child who had changed his life without trying. "It's not an ending," he said gently. "It's the beginning of everything." In the end, Nathan's life changed in ways he never could have predicted, on the night a small girl asked him for a bowl of soup. What began as a moment of curiosity became the turning point of his entire existence. Through Lily's quiet bravery and Grace's enduring love, he was reminded of a part of himself he had long abandoned, the boy who once believed in kindness and trust in the power of human connection. Rebuilding his bond with Grace allowed him to confront the pieces of his past he'd buried under ambition. Caring for Lily opened a space in his heart he never expected to fill, a space that softened the edges of a life once driven only by achievement. Grace found healing not just in medical care, but in the reassurance that her granddaughter would never again face the world alone. And Lily, after years of surviving, instead of simply living, finally stepped into a childhood she deserved, one filled with safety, possibility, and a sense of belonging. Together, the three of them created a home that wasn't defined by luxury but by warmth. Their story wasn't about wealth rescuing poverty. It was about love restoring what had been lost. It was about second chances for all of them. This journey reminds us that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the smallest encounters. A single act of compassion can open doors we never knew were locked. We often walk past people without truly seeing them, but every face we overlook is carrying a story we know nothing about. Nathan followed Lily out of concern, but what he discovered was a truth that reshaped him entirely, a reminder that purpose isn't found in success or status, but in the lives we choose to touch. For the audience watching today, the lesson is simple yet powerful: kindness has consequences. Every time we pause long enough to listen, to help, or to care, we create ripples that stretch farther than we can imagine. Whether it's supporting a neighbor reconnecting with an old friend, or offering help to someone in need, small choices can become turning points not just for them, but for us as well. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the goodness still left in the world, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support gives us the encouragement to keep creating meaningful content, sharing powerful stories, and bringing more hope-filled narratives to life. Thank you for being here, and we hope you'll stay with us for the next journey. In the end, Nathan's life changed in ways he never could have predicted on the night a small girl asked him for a bowl of soup. What began as a moment of curiosity became the turning point of his entire existence. Through Lily's quiet bravery and Grace's enduring love, he was reminded of a part of himself he had long abandoned, the boy who once believed in kindness and trust in the power of human connection. Rebuilding his bond with Grace allowed him to confront the pieces of his past he'd buried under ambition. Caring for Lily opened a space in his heart he never expected to fill, a space that softened the edges of a life once driven only by achievement. Grace found healing not just in medical care, but in the reassurance that her granddaughter would never again face the world alone. And Lily, after years of surviving instead of simply living, finally stepped into a childhood she deserved, one filled with safety, possibility, and a sense of belonging. Together, the three of them created a home that wasn't defined by luxury, but by warmth. Their story wasn't about wealth rescuing poverty, it was about love restoring what had been lost. It was about second chances for all of them. This journey reminds us that sometimes the greatest transformations begin with the smallest encounters. A single act of compassion can open doors we never knew were locked. We often walk past people without truly seeing them, but every face we overlook is carrying a story we know nothing about. Nathan followed Lily out of concern, but what he discovered was a truth that reshaped him entirely. A reminder that purpose isn't found in success or status, but in the lives we choose to touch. For the audience watching today, the lesson is simple, yet powerful. Kindness has consequences. Every time we pause long enough to listen, to help, or to care, we create ripples that stretch farther than we can imagine. Whether it's supporting a neighbor, reconnecting with an old friend, or offering help to someone in need, small choices can become turning points not just for them, but for us as well. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of the goodness still left in the world, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support gives us the encouragement to keep creating meaningful content, sharing powerful stories, and bringing more hope-filled narratives to life.
If you want this type of stories, then subscribe to Golden Chapter Whispers.